Welcome everyone who is present in the meeting and welcome those watching online at home. I'll remind members and the public that the meeting is being webcast live and everyone seated must use the microphones to be heard on the webcast. There are no scheduled fire alarms this evening, so if one goes off, it is for real. There are two exits in this room, one through the double doors and one through another one behind me to the right. And I'll do some introductions now. I'm Stephen Watson, the chair. I have Rani Gaturi, the planning solicitor, Lewis Grant, assistant planning officer, Peter Mannings, the committee support officer, Martin Plummer over there, service manager for development management and enforcement. Got Hannah Weston, the interim development management team leader, Sarah Saunders, head of planning and building control, and actually I've got two introductions. I'll introduce Simon Marlowe, the deputy chair, or vice chair, isn't it? Vice chair, yes. Vice chair. And I would also like to introduce the council's executive member for planning and growth, Councillor Vicky Glover-Ward, who won't be taking an active part in the meeting, but is here in an observing capacity. And next is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, just the one from Councillor Rachel Carter, and Councillor Vicky Smith is substituting for her. That's it. Thank you.
And again, just may I ask all participants to please use their microphones when speaking, as the meeting is being webcast. Now, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Well, I do. I am declaring a personal interest under the Council's Code of Conduct on application 3/24/0824/HH, which is the application we'll be hearing tonight, on the grounds that I am also a member of Hertford Town Council and sit on the planning subcommittee who made representations about this application. I can confirm that I have not predetermined the application and consider the application with an open mind based on its merits. Next, the minutes. Members, we have before us the minutes from the meeting held on 18th September 2024. If there are no amendments needed to the minutes, please can we have a proposer for the minutes being an accurate record of the meeting? Councillor Stowe. Is that seconded? Councillor Devonshire. Yeah. Okay, can I have a vote to accept the minutes, please? Those four. And against? And any abstentions? Yep, so now we swiftly move on to item 5A. 3/24/0824/HH, rear outhouse at 1 Mangrove Drive, Hertfordshire. That's on our agenda pages 13 to 30. Well, I'm going to invite Lewis Grant or Hannah Weston, who's it? Lewis, to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. So next slide, please. So the application relates to 1 Mangrove Drive, in which the applicant wishes to erect an outbuilding at the base of their residential garden. Next slide, please. The application site is located to the south of Hertford off Mangrove Road. The proposed outbuilding would be used for purposes ancillary to the enjoyment of the dwelling house. Here you can see the location of 1 Mangrove Drive in the wider area. So over to the east, you have Balls Park. To the north, there is Simon Ball School. And to the northwest, you have Richard Hale School. Next slide, please. Here we have site plans, allowing you to put the property into context with its surroundings. One Mangrove Drive is a two-storey detached property. The main dwelling house occupies the northern portion of the application site, and there is a long, thin garden area to the rear with a dogleg extension to the west. The outbuilding is proposed to be erected to the west of this dogleg portion of residential garden land, and the proposed outbuilding would be situated approximately 2 metres from the western boundary and 2.43 metres from both the northern and southern boundaries of this dogleg portion of garden. These plans highlight the separation distance between the application site and that of the neighbouring properties. So the distances between the proposed outbuilding and the building lines of neighbouring properties to the north is 33 metres, to the east is 50 metres, and to the south is 16.5 metres, respectively. Next slide, please. Here you can see various views from the site of the proposed development towards neighbouring properties. All photographs were taken by the CAFES officer during a site visit. As can be witnessed, the site has several trees both within and surrounding it which provide screening. Looking at the top left, there's a picture looking to the northwest of the site, which looks back towards the application dwelling house and towards number 3 and 5 Mangrove Drive. The picture in the bottom left corner is taken from the application site and is looking down towards the southwest of the site towards numbers 20 and 22 Oak Grove. As you can see, there is screening between the sites, although there is opportunities to see beyond. Next slide, please. The drawings on this slide show the proposed design of the outbuilding. The outbuilding would have a hipped roof form with a maximum height of 3.7 metres and a height of 2.5 metres at the eaves. The proposed outbuilding would have a width of 9 metres and a depth of 6 metres, equating to a footprint of 54 square metres. The outbuilding would be comprised of red-facing brick and cedar roof shingles. The fenestration would be dark grey aluminium. In addition, the side and rear-facing windows would be fitted with obscure glazing and would be fixed shut below 1.7 metres above the floor level in the room in which the window is installed. Next slide, please. Here, you can see the proposed floor plan for the outbuilding, which would include a virtual skeet shooting simulator, gym equipment, a desk, and a small toilet. These uses are considered to be ancillary to the host dwelling house. It is worth noting that the proposed outbuilding could be used for any ancillary purpose. Next slide, please. Here, it is possible to see the tree protection plan provided within the arboricultural method statement. The key to the left describes the various protection measures put into place to ensure the proposed development would not have an impact upon the trees, both on and off site. These protection measures include a tree protection barrier, which is denoted by the red line, temporary scaffolding incorporating planked ground protection, which is in the orange hatching, and temporary ground protection for construction access in the pink hatching. The council's arboricultural consultant was contacted in relation to this case and concluded that there would be no harm to any existing trees, both on site and off site. Please be aware there are late comments for this application. However, these do not alter the recommendation. In conclusion, there are not considered to be any significant visual or amenity concerns with the implementation of this proposal, nor are there any concerns regarding the surrounding landscaping. It is recommended that planning permission should be granted subject to the appropriate conditions. Thank you.
So first to speak is Scott Laban representing the objectors. You have 3 minutes.
You hear me? Okay, good evening, members. I'm here to speak as a resident of 20 Oak Grove, the most impacted property, and at the request of other neighbouring objectors. Objecting neighbours have never sought to have the application refused, except in the general principle. However, the proposal is overly large, measuring 9 metres by 6 metres and 3.7 metres high. The 6 metre flank wall will directly face my property, run almost half the length of my boundary, and loom over my garden, rising 2 metres above the existing fence. At 54 square metres, it is larger than many local 2-bedroom flats currently for sale on Rightmove. It will be visually dominant and be unneighbourly. Existing deciduous planting within the application site and on our shared boundary, inclusive of recent planting by the applicant, is wholly inadequate to screen the proposal with no leaves present for half the year. It will be out of character. It will dwarf all other garden outbuildings close by, be similar to a small bungalow in scale, eroding a peaceful and secluded garden area sitting to the rear of several properties. Neighbours have concerns regarding the potential future use of the building, possibly becoming an annex or an Airbnb, noting its size, the provision of showering facilities and the permanent nature of its build. There are concerns over noise and disturbance that might be caused by future uses. A building of a more modest scale would help decrease such fears. Officers have currently given no weight to the suggested use to host a shooting simulator for the applicant's daughter. Are correctly given no weight. Such a use cannot be conditioned in perpetuity or be enforced. Officers have previously advised that they are not expecting the applicant to implement the permission should it be secured further to the applicant's own admission. Surveillance is not adequately addressed. The case officer advocates limited harm to neighbouring amenities due to levels of separation and the presence of fences, trees and hedgerows, but also concludes the site benefits from natural surveillance as it is surrounded by neighbours. Either neighbours can readily see the development site or they cannot. The proposed outbuilding would be more than 55 metres from the front of the dwelling. How will a fire appliance attend in the case of a fire? The proposals conflict with relevant policies by not respecting the character of the site and surrounding area. It would also be a significant detriment to multiple households, including several vulnerable people who significantly benefit from time in their gardens. Although neighbours seek deferral or, if necessary, refusal to enable further amendments, if the committee resolve to approve, please do request additions to the proposed conditions to include the landscaping condition to require year-round screening to the immediate boundary of 20 Oak Grove and elsewhere as appropriate, to be maintained between a height of 2 and 3.5 metres, all details to be agreed in consultation with the landscape officer, appropriate wording to ensure the outbuilding is never used as an independent dwelling, Airbnb or similar, and only be used incidental or ancillary to the main dwelling house, and to ensure submission of appropriate noise mitigation and insulation details to be incorporated into the building design and landscaping planting schedule. So please don't let one's person's alleged dream be everyone else's nightmare. Thank you.
Right, next we have, I'm sorry, oh yes, Neil Davis speaking. Yes, 3 minutes, and just you're speaking for the application.
Thank you. The application before you tonight is a combination of several years of planning submissions to obtain permission for an outbuilding for purposes ancillary to the existing dwelling house. In that time, the applicant has reviewed plans with officers before submission, scanning back the building and making numerous concessions. Full arboricultural report has also been provided and updates whenever requested, including specifically in relation to Tree T7. As a result of this very protracted process, the head of planning and their professional officers are now completely satisfied with the proposal and are recommending the application be approved subject to conditions. The report before you represents a thorough assessment of the planning merits of the proposal, examining every material consideration in detail, including the impact on every neighbouring resident. The result of each assessment is that this relationship is completely acceptable. Given my experience in the industry, I think I'm entitled to add that these type of cases for this scale of development would, in 99% of cases, be approved by officers without even a need to be put to the planning committee. Dealing briefly with some of the comments that have been made, I would respond as follows. Impact on neighbours. This is a low single-storey structure with a shallow sloping roof. The only full-height windows look over the applicant's garden, not adjacent gardens. As set out in the officer report, the separation distance to neighbours are generous and not unusual in a suburban context such as this. Just because something might be visible, this doesn't mean it's overbearing. Overdevelopment, the outbuilding's coverage and distance to neighbouring buildings does not render this as a serious consideration. It will remain as an ancillary feature to the main dwelling. The surrounding area contains some notable examples of other outbuildings of a similar or larger size, including the property just 2 metres to the east at 62 Mangrove Road. This building is larger than the outbuilding sought at 1 Mangrove Drive. Our building will be over 2 metres from all boundaries. Potential reuse as a separate dwelling. The building is landlocked and has no independent access. It would in any event need planning permission. Trees. The applicant has updated all reports and the council's professional tree officer is completely satisfied. To date, the applicant has spent over £2,000 on trees. And finally, biodiversity. The building would be sited on mown suburban lawn with little biodiversity value. So in terms of the quantum of third-party representations, members will note at paragraph 7.3 of the officer report that there have been 19 objections and 14 in support. It's acknowledged that the majority of objections are from adjacent neighbours as stated. However, what the report fails to recognise is that these objections are primarily from 7 households, including 7 separate submissions from one address and 6 from another. I hope this brings some context to the situation. In conclusion, I'd formally request that members support the recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, now I'm going to call on ward councillors to speak. First, Councillor Rachel Carter. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Rachel Carter, District Councillor for Hertford Castle Ward. I've been asked to speak on this planning application by residents from Mangrove Drive and Oak Grove to represent their views. And I was previously asked by residents to call this application in, which I did, partly because of the specific planning issues and partly because it raises wider questions about what can be built in a domestic back garden. I should point out from the outset that the residents are not asking for the application to be point blank refused, but they are asking for changes to be made and conditions to be added so that impacts on the neighbours are reduced. Planning applications often involve a process of negotiation, and I would hope that as a general rule, applicants will try to take into account the concerns of their neighbours for the benefit, for the sake of their community as a whole. The first point concerns the use of the building, which is intended to house a simulated clay pigeon shooting gallery for training purposes. And I think we can all wish the potential user of this facility the best with her Olympic ambitions. However, the proposed building is a permanent brick-built one, and clearly it may have different uses over time, especially if there is a change of ownership in the future. Residents would like to be reassured that there are conditions in place to ensure that the way the building is used in the future is appropriate to a quiet residential area. Noise is a potential issue, given that the outbuilding is at a distance from the main house, and near neighbours would like a high level of noise insulation to be specified. The next point is around the size of the building. I think officers can probably give the exact details of the size of it, but I believe it's 3.7 meters high and the size of a bungalow, a retirement bungalow. Residents feel strongly that this is out of character for the sort of parkland nature of the area. Typical garden buildings are much smaller, normally constructed from timber. Although it won't be visible from the owner's dwelling, it will rise high above the fence line of close neighbours and affect their visual amenity. Residents acknowledge that the most recent version has been slightly reduced in size from the original one, but it still remains very large for a residential outbuilding, and they would like the size to be reduced to a more modest scale in keeping with the character of the area. If a garden building of this scale is permitted, there is a risk of an unwelcome precedent being set, leading to a loss of green space and overdevelopment in the area. And the third point is on landscaping and biodiversity. Residents feel that this outbuilding should be screened from the neighbour's view throughout the year by evergreen planting, and at present I think the planting is deciduous. The landscape recommendations are quite general and they would like this sort of screening to be specified. And there are further concerns about the effects of building on the roots of these trees, which perhaps causing them to become unstable and fall, or affecting the long-term health of the trees. As I said before, planning usually involves negotiation and compromise. I hope the committee will take into account the concerns and wishes of the neighbours of the property in question in considering this application and recommending improvements and conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So now, Councillor Sarah Hopewell to speak for the application. 5 minutes to.
Thank you. So I'm Councillor Sarah Hopewell. I'm also a Hertford Castle Ward councillor. And thank you for the opportunity to speak on the application for 1 Mangrove Drive. I first learnt about the applicant's intention to build an outhouse facility to support his daughter's training at the beginning of this year. The applicant had initially contacted me to discuss the project, but he had hoped that the build would be acceptable under the permitted development rules. However, for reasons pertaining to curtilage, this was not achievable. And so in following planning advice, this then prompted the applicant's application for planning permission. I visited the applicant's property during this time, and when I went, I noted the unusual shape of his garden, with an initial narrow section before opening out to a larger space at the end. This arrangement, to my mind, unfortunately makes it difficult to add an outhouse closer to the property. The applicant explained further to me about his daughter's sport and the desire he has to support her, along with the challenges presented through training. There are few training opportunities in the nearby area, and the applicant and his daughter are currently regularly travelling many miles each week for her training sessions. As with any sport, the more advanced the applicant's daughter has become, the more important it is for her to train as often as possible. I'm sure you'll appreciate that all top-level sport is highly competitive, and the ability to regularly train is critical for achieving full potential. I'll be honest, I hadn't fully appreciated the applicant's daughter's achievements until he shared some newspaper articles with me, which detailed just how talented she is in her sport. In terms of concerns, I am aware that several comments have been made regarding the size of the outhouse, the potential loss of greenery, and potential future use of the building, depending on the aims of future owners. I do also understand and have sympathy for these concerns and fully appreciate the issues that have been raised. With regard to the size, I am aware that after the neighbours expressed their concerns and strength of feeling about the proposal, the applicant made several adjustments to the size of the proposal, bringing down the area and reducing the height. As I understand it, the applicant has also offered to provide additional screening to shield the view of the building, which will hopefully help address some of the concerns around visibility and also loss of greenery. The design also aims to shield from noise disruption by virtue of being brick built as well as double glazing doors. In terms of potential future use, I am aware that this is a significant concern expressed in some of the objections. While none of us can predict the future, what I can say is that when I visited the property, the only option I had to physically access the garden was going through the applicant's home. I imagine this would not be a convenient arrangement for any future owner looking to annex the outhouse building, and will hopefully help alleviate fears around this happening. Concerns about the future are of course understandable. At the same time, none of us can predict what will happen to any property in future years. And so I feel it would be somewhat unfair to determine the decision on the application on the basis of an unknown future. What we can consider is the present and the thriving sporting career of a young Olympic hopeful who I would like to wish every success in her ongoing training and competitions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, members, the debate is open, so. Oh, yep. Forgot.
Before you-
First of all,
sorry.
Sarah Saunders would like
Yeah,
to.
sorry, Chair. Before you go to the debate, can I just clarify the point about the member call-in process, just in case it isn't clear? The application was initially going to be determined by planning officers under delegated authority, and in line with the council's constitution, which you're familiar with, a member call-in request was received, which Councillor Carter has referred to tonight, and it was agreed by the chair of DMC that the officer delegation would be removed. Following this, there were amendments to the application, and officers incorrectly took it back to the chair in the belief that it was possible to revert back to delegated powers. That's not correct. Once the chair accepts a referral to DMC, this can't be reserved. So here we are tonight, and I just hope that just clarifies the position. You've got the application before you tonight to consider. Thank you.
Okay, members, how do you want to start? Would Councillor Stowe?
It always seems to me starts things off, doesn't it? But I'd like some clarification. On page 22 and item 8.22, could we add it up on the screen, please? Now, would you just, the officer, please just tell me the northern boundary again? Because when you made your site visit, it appears that you noted that the landscape features along the northern boundary were being removed. And I'd like a bit more expand on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. So to clarify, when I was attending the site of the neighbour at 20 Oak Grove, I noticed there was a construction skip out the front that had several items of landscaping on the site there. In addition, there were we were talking on the site, and they mentioned that there was removing the planting along there, and inferred that the sycamore tree in the northwest corner was also potentially scheduled to be removed. Sorry, I meant the northern boundary of 20 Oak Groves up.
Okay, anyone else? I mean, do we want to deal with, now we've started off on landscape, well, Councillor Estop.
I'd just like to start by saying that I understand the concern of neighbours who will see this from their windows, see it from their gardens, and their concern about that visibility and about the character of the back garden area. It's clear that this is an anomaly. This is a very strange site with this dog leg, and it's so strange that the report says that there was a time when this wasn't really considered part of the curtilage of the property. So it's a very unusual situation. However, what's being proposed is it does seem to be very near to what is often permitted development. Permitted development does enable summer houses and studios and sheds and outhouses of very big dimensions relative to the garden. And then the actual the dimensions, distance from the boundary, and the materials, seem to me that the report is right, that this isn't going to have an undue impact on the surrounding properties. But what I do recognise is that while all the gardens around it are very long, the ones on the south side are not so long. So 20 and 22, I think, Oak Grove, they are shorter. And it seems to me that, you know, as it is actually a planning application, it is coming before us, that we do have some means of control, and we should make sure that it is screened as well as it can be for those two properties in particular. And so I would suggest that if the committee is minded to approve it, I'd like to suggest that first of all, there is a condition about it being incidental to the use of the house, because there has been this ambiguity about the curtilage before, and I think that needs to be, we need to state that it is part of the curtilage of the house, and that it should be incidental only. But I also wonder whether, because we hear so much about this proposed use, and it's such a specific thing, I wonder whether there should also be a condition that is personal to the occupants of the house, because it's, you know, it's effectively like a little training facility. And I'd like to suggest that that condition number 6, which is the one about landscape design, that either that wording includes the word screening on the south side, or that the reason for that condition is changed to say to ensure adequate screening on the south side. I think that, you know, that making that explicit in the reason would be helpful.
Councillor Copley.
I think we. Sorry. I think when we just started off a moment ago, we were obviously talking about landscaping, etc. And obviously Councillor Estep said something about it. I wanted to check with officers whether, obviously, again, when we're talking about condition 6 and just the landscaping generally, whether we can say, you know, so it's green all year round or something like that. Because when you're talking about the height of the building, it's 3.7 metres, which I can only think is, you know, more than double me. I know I'm not that big, but it still is quite sizable. And I can see that having, you know, a negative effect on the neighbours. Not saying that we, well, if we decide to move forward, I don't see that's a reason to turn down a building, but I do think we should look at that condition in more detail in terms of the landscaping there. And I just wanted to clarify again about it being, we're absolutely clear that the health of existing trees there won't be impacted, because it did look very close to me on the plan. And I know we've got an arborist, but I mean, I know there's also been comments about the plan not being too accurate. And just from my personal experience of other sites, I have seen that where plans aren't too accurate and actually, you know, the building is encroaching on trees and causing damage. So I just wanted to be absolutely 100% clear that that wasn't a problem here. Thank you.
Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Buckmaster, noting that we're building up a bit of a list of questions, I think, for the officer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my first point was that, again, on the landscaping and asking if it could be included in the conditions that it wasn't evergreen landscaping, or they had screening all year round. But one of the points I wanted to have clarification on was many years ago, when I did my training on planning for planning committees, we were actually told we couldn't consider the future use of a building, that they were not planning reasons. And I know this has come up a lot tonight with people concerned about the future use under Airbnb and other things. But I want to say, we were told, and I have to be honest, it was under the previous head of planning, who used to tell us we couldn't consider that. They were not planning reasons. And I just would like clarification on that, please.
Okay, I think I'll pass to the planning officers, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chair. Shall we start with the question regarding the landscape plans? Landscape conditions, sorry. So essentially, it was officer opinion that the proposed development was acceptable without the landscaping conditions. The landscape conditions were added to kind of to supplement and to make it more amenable to all parties involved. I'm not too sure with regard to conditioning evergreen trees in particular. I can pass to Hannah.
Sorry, thank you. So it would be unreasonable. It wouldn't be enforceable to condition for it to be evergreen all year round, or a certain height. It wouldn't be enforceable, so we couldn't do that. So it would have to be just the landscaping condition.
I think the other one, oh, sorry, I'm rushing this.
In terms of the ancillary use of the outbuilding, essentially there's, I mean, home gyms are a very typical use for resident actual outbuildings, whether under permitted development or under a usual planning application. We could condition that the proposed outbuilding would have to be in an ancillary use and in relation to the main dwelling house. That could be a condition we could add on.
So just to add, they would need planning permission to change the use of the building to anything else. So it's not really a necessary condition, but we could put it on just as a, like, for support. But yeah, it's not actually needed because they would need planning permission to change it to a non-ancillary use. So like a bungalow or something would need planning permission.
Councillor Holt.
Thank you, Chair. In respect to the future use and what was previously mentioned, and also previously on one of the comments suggested that, and from my understanding, was that there was no way to access the site and would be from this development or directly without going through the property. Is that the case? I know from just looking at the plans that it looks like there is a pathway to the west of the property, which would lead to the development without going through the property itself. Just for a clarification, is that the case? Would you be able to access this unit without entering the property? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. So what I'm getting from that question is access from kind of the south or the west of the site into the bottom of the garden.
No, so this would be for on the agenda for document 5A, additional documents. That there's a larger site plan of the actual site of the area of the property. So you'd be able to enter from the road, so Mangrove Drive, enter along the side of the existing property down onto the site without actually entering the property. And in regards to future use, I think it's and just to clarify other comments that were made, that you would be able to access this site if it was for future use without entering the property itself. Thank you.
Yeah, that's page 30, I'm told, on the agenda. I'm going to go to Councillor Stowe and then Councillor Buckmaster.
Keep on the same subject, thank you. As a lot of concern has been expressed about this other use of this site, we all know it needs planning permission. We all know that this is going to be a subservient building to the main house, so nothing can get a private access to this building. But I think a condition saying that just that really would reassure the residents that is the case, and that's all I feel we should do it for. Okay.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you. Really, when I first read the report, my concern was about the noise, because obviously it just mentioned it was going to be used for skeet shooting in the report, and I really didn't understand what that was, and that's been clarified tonight. So really, I just wanted reassurance about, obviously this is a simulation for the training. How noisy is this likely to be?
No, yeah, officer. Thank you, Councillor Buckmaster. Well, I can't speak to the exact noise levels. If it's a simulation, I imagine it would be anything similar to a standard video game. If it's a kind of virtual reality, is based on my assumption. We don't have any specific noise levels.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It strikes me that the opponents or the objectors to this, they've been quite clear that they're not seeking to have it turned down, and so we should just be really looking at the conditions that they're looking for to see what we can accommodate. I agree with the comments already made that if we can provide reassurance about future use to the extent that it's possible, I think that would be a good thing to do. We've looked at the landscaping. I noticed there was a little, there was a mention of noise insulation, and I don't know whether we have any powers to put in anything about that. Realise that noise is a tricky one, and I don't, there can be no assumption that this is likely to be a particularly noisy activity, but what powers do we have in terms of noise insulation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So because it's for a residential outbuilding, it would probably be unreasonable to condition for noise insulation. Also, if it was noisy for any reason, environmental health have their own powers to control it. So I think it would probably be unreasonable to condition for noise.
Councillor Estop.
Thank you. Can I have comments from the officers on my two questions, which were whether the reason for condition 6 can be modified to reference to screening at the boundary, and secondly, whether there can be a personal element to the condition, about the shooting simulator only personal to the occupants of that house.
Yeah, if you want to take that.
Thank you, Councillor Estop. With regard to the condition being personal to the use, that would be unreasonable. The permission runs with the land, so essentially that would mean if any future occupier would come in, it would then have to kind of maintain that same virtual skeet shooting use. So it's any ancillary use is what it could be used for, and that's that. Yeah, I'll move.
Sorry, could I just expand on that? So because we're considering an outbuilding basically, and whether the outbuilding is acceptable, and our recommendation is the outbuilding itself is acceptable, and there's no personal reason why. So normally, if it's a personal reason, it would normally be unacceptable, and you're saying there's a personal reason, and that's why it might be okay for a limited time. But we think the building itself is okay in the form it is, and there's no reason to make it personal. While I'm on, with regards to landscaping, I think we could, screening, yeah, we could add in the reason to get details of screening on the southern boundary.
Councillor Holt.
Thank you, Chair. Would I also be able to maybe have an answer to my question that was regarding the clarification on the point that was raised regarding if you could enter the proposed site without going through the existing property on Mangrove Drive? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So there's no access to the garden other than through the site. You could get into the garden without going into the house down the side passageway, but it's not like an easy access way.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
So, Councillor Stowe.
It's just a point of interest, really. The previous 3 applications for licence to build, and one of the points they made was because it was outside the curtilage of the main house. Now, obviously the site now still remains outside the curtilage of the main house. And I looked at the drawings on the previous ones. They didn't look much bigger to me. And I just wanted you to clarify why this is being recommended for approval when the previous 3 applications for licence were refused.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. So the previous 3 applications were submitted as certificates of lawfulness under Class E of the Permitted Development Order, and they were refused, as you were saying, because the proposed outbuilding was not within the curtilage of the dwelling house. This decision was made because that dogleg portion of land is believed to have been bought at a later date and added to the residential garden of that. So it remains in the residential garden use, which is why it can be applied. A normal householder planning application can be applied for and for the same thing. With regard to the scale of the development under the certificates of lawfulness, I believe it was a little bit larger. But the guidelines say it could be up to 4 meters tall, and 2.5 meters at the eaves, as long as it's not as close to the boundaries as about 2 meters. So it could have been a bit larger if that was curtilage, but since it was not deemed curtilage, then
So we have, I think we've got a couple, one minor change to one of the requirements and one of the conditions, sorry, and condition 6, which was to add that reason for screening. And the other condition I think we're moving to is a condition that to condition the building being ancillary to the main building. Is that where the committee is? Councillor Stowe.
With those two alterations to conditions, I'm prepared to propose scheme for approval.
Okay, if Councillor Buckmaster.
And I'm happy to second it.
Okay, I've got that now. Does anybody want to continue discussing this? If not, I will put it to a vote. Okay. So, members, it's been proposed and seconded that we grant planning permission for this application with the condition of a new condition that the application building is remains ancillary to the main building. And the second condition is a modification, reason 6, that reason 6 that screening is added to the condition 6. The reason is screening. Yeah, we've got that. Screening on the southern boundary, specifically. So, can I have a vote, please, to approve? – 11, 12. Unanimous. So at 10 to 8, that planning permission is granted. Item 6. Yes, so item 6, that's for noting, but we can discuss it. Okay. Any comments? Nope. And there's no urgent business.
Chair?
And oh yes, we do have some urgent business. Councillor Estop.
I noticed that the minutes are now, we were told about this, but the minutes are now much briefer. So they just record the formal decisions of the committee. They don't have who spoke and what they said. That's all understood. But I wonder whether the minutes could include the changes that the committee proposes to the recommendation, like we've done tonight. I think if they're in the minutes, that would be helpful. And the last application, I think that would have been helpful as well.
I'm told they will do, but they will do. Okay. All right. Members, I'm going to declare this meeting over at roughly 10 to 8.